claro.
Everybody's voting for the friendly voice of radio, the people's choice. Music, weather, sports, and news, it's radio. The people choose. Everybody's swinging to the swinging voice of radio, the people's choice. Big fry, small fry, dawn to dawn, it's radio that turns them on.
The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com, and thank you.
Your Saturday paranormal psychic and ghost hunter on Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, James Creachbaum.
Hello, I'm coming to you live from our secret compound. I'm James Creachbaum, and this is Friday night, and I'm filling in for Gary Anderson. Not to fear, he will be back on Monday night, as usual. And my guest tonight is Charles-van-Heyden. Charles, are you there, and how are you doing?
Yeah, splendidly, as a matter of fact, James. Very well.
Good, good. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Well, since the program is about the paranormal, I have been, since a young fellow, always interested in that area of life. Of course, school never touched on it, and even the universities don't talk about it. And about 12 years ago, I started writing again, and I published a number of books, a couple of which are paranormal, and a couple of science fiction, which we'll talk about maybe a little bit later on. But I've been to seances. My grandmother used to tell me about a place called Red Rock, I think it's called Big Rock out in California, where the UFOs in the 50s apparently landed and had conversations with groups of people up to 1,000 or 2,000 people. And I used to listen to her with rapt attention and thought that was all great, and that one day maybe I would see one of these aliens or flying saucers. And of course, around that time, as a kid, there was movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still, and even the first crack at War of the Worlds was done. So it's always been something of interest to me: aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials.
So you've seen UFOs in your lifetime, though, right?
Yeah, right. I spoke about this a couple of times in previous shows. It was I had the date wrong. It was 10 years earlier. It wasn't 89. It was 79. And I was up on top of my apartment building where I was living at the time. And it was a summer day. I think it was July, quite warm, around 8:30. And I looked northeast towards the Sunset Strip in a place that was like a pizza parlor. And by golly, there was this very bright floating disc or floating object just standing there. And I thought, that's not a street light. It's too bright, and
Wow.
It's just too big, And it just hovered. I could see it kind of just hovering, kind of like it was surveilling, And it stayed there for about 10, 15 minutes, which is what gave me the idea that this could be something from, another planet. And sure enough, in about 12 or 15 minutes, it blanked out. It just went bang out of there. So I went, interesting. Shaky's Pizza, as a matter of fact. It's still there.
Now, let me ask, this was in L.A.? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I lived in Los Angeles for many years. I was raised in New York City, but I spent a good deal of time back at home. Another 15 or 20 years there as well. Yeah.
Wow. And did anybody else see this, along with you?
I couldn't say because I didn't go around the neighborhood canvassing, doing a survey.
Right.
at least I wouldn't do that at night.
Yeah, I didn't know if you happened to see other people, looking at this because, I mean, it's a populated city. I thought for sure, you might see somebody else in awe looking at this,
Well, I think maybe you don't know if you haven't been to L.A. Some people, you could probably walk down the street naked and people wouldn't even know that you're there. It's just one of those things, It's like, unless you come up and just say boo in someone's face, they kind of don't pay attention,
Okay. No, I've never been to LA. That's why I was just curious. So that was your first experience then in '89 of actually seeing one, correct?
Yeah, 79, not 89.
79. 79, okay.
Yeah.
Now,
about 30 years ago.
Okay, in the following years, have you witnessed other ones since then? And and if you have, were they the same kind, different, or tell me about that?
No, I really don't. I'm not looking out for them. If I look up in the skies, I'm looking at planets. I'm looking at stars. I'm looking at constellations. I even had on one of my earlier cell phones, I had an app which told you exactly at the hour you were looking, the minute you were looking, what constellations were overhead and what the stars' names were in the constellation. I got rid of that because I have to put attention on work, on writing, publishing, on life. It's okay to stargaze for a while, but it doesn't satisfy. It's just something. It's kind of like a hobby now.
Right. Now, did that inspire you to write some of your books, or did it inspire some of the writing? Tell us something about that. Tell us something about that.
Well, interestingly enough, I have up here on my screen several references to UFOs, and one of them has to do with Peru. And in my first novella called Confessions of an Alien Marooned on Earth, there is a portion of the second book where our anti-hero, Elvis Apolliani, finally gets to Peru, the land of the UFOs, because that's the only place where he thinks he might be able to transport safely back to his planet from which he was banished to Earth. So, yeah, they're very, very prevalent down there, and most half the population just thinks it's a normal thing, like eating spaghetti. It's just very, very, very common down there, and that's one reason why I chose it to put it into the science fiction novella.
Mm-hmm.
I could read from this. There's some very interesting pages here about Machu Picchu, where there's these very odd. There's these very odd patterns in the ground you can't see except from very high up, and they're so old it'd be impossible to attribute it to airplanes or even balloons because this is way before balloons, before even the 1700s. So it had to be some kind of aerial machine with intelligent life, probably with a very strong laser, making these emblems and these very, very large patterns down there in Peru. That's just one of the many mystical, unusual things which I revel in, I don't tell anybody about it unless I'm talking with them at length and they know me and they are somewhat interested in that area, because most people aren't, Most people have the day-to-day demands that take up enough of their attention, and just to find something nice to do on the weekend is all they can do to survive and to be happy. So these kind of things are, and listen, we have a lot of our listeners, according to Gary, are they're truck drivers. They're 18-wheelers, like my brother Randy up there in Washington, near Hayden River.
Mm-hmm.
So they're listening for entertainment. They're not going to probably go and do much research, read any books about this. They're just kind of like, hey, it's kind of lonely out there on the road. Let's listen to some fun guys and let's have some entertainment. So that's all we're doing here.
Right. Well, I'm fascinated with that stuff, like you were mentioning, along with the Nazca lines and that kind of stuff, because, like you said, we're talking hundreds of years ago, and you can only see them from the air.
Yeah.
And now,
Yeah.
have you went there and investigated them in person too?
No. I've traveled to Venezuela, but I've not gone down to Peru.
Mm-hmm.
And I have other interests in Europe and Eastern Europe and places like that for culture, because our immediate culture, our English, German culture comes from that area, and I'd like to do more research in that area before I spend money, time, and effort to go down to Peru or Chile, which, by the way, is a very long way from here. It's much further than Europe, and
right.
I don't speak enough of the language. At least over in Europe, most people speak English because it's a default language. I'd rather be more comfortable over there than going down to native Indian areas where, even in my book, I have the person that he meets, Amparo, or what's her name, Sarah Amparo. She only speaks a little bit of broken English. He has to quickly learn all the Spanish that he didn't learn in school so he can converse with her, because eventually the aliens, the UFO jockeys, are going to come, because she speaks with them, telepathically. So she doesn't have to speak with them with any language. She speaks to them telepathically. He says, well, man, if I can't speak to her and she's speaking to them, and she messes up on translating what I'm saying to her, I may never get where I want to go,
He might get in trouble. Who knows?
Big trouble. Because once you leave Earth and you don't have an exact location, coordinates out there, light years from where you are, you can wind up billions of miles from where you wanted to land up and be lost forever, so that's part of the whole
Yeah,
story.
that might take you a while to hitchhike back home from there, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Jeez. You mentioned about those things you can only see from the air. There's another thing, I don't know if you ever looked into it before. It's called Layla Bellas, like these rock-hewn churches. They were carved out of solid rock. It just amazes me how they did that, and it kind of reminded me of what you're talking about with the lasers and stuff, how they must have had some kind of technology that, how they had it, who knows,
Yeah, I also don't doubt reading Zecharia Sitchin's books, the 7 or 8 books I read of his, which I discussed with Gary last time in length. We had about a 2-hour conversation. Sitchin documents very, very meticulously how the Egyptian pyramids were really built. And they weren't built with a bunch of naked Egyptians, pulling on these huge cords, which would take years even to make. These things were cut. These blocks were cut with lasers, powerful lasers, and probably lifted with levitation devices and stuff. Just like the ones that are in these spacecrafts that go up and down and sideways and backwards faster than you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 to 10. So yeah, this is we're in a part of our lives. We're in a part of our lives where we're just coming to realize how regressive our civilizations have. When you take a look at the Roman civilization, James, and you realize that they started out as a republic, and they lasted about 500, 600 years. But by the time the ne'er-do-wells and the people that cause suppression, that live by suppression, that live by controlling people and controlling their bodies, got through with the Roman Republic, it became an empire, and then it descended into an anarchy and a kind of a chaotic situation where, by the turn of the millennia, nobody wanted to have anything to do with Roman life. They didn't want to bathe, they didn't want to eat, they didn't want to learn anything, and we had the Dark Ages. See? That's what happened there. And if you want references on this, well, just read Durant, or the other fellow who has done Gibbon. Just read about the sentiment of those times after the Roman Empire went to hell in a handbasket. The reason I mention this is we are at a point where we're learning that we're not as fabulous a civilization as we